There's a lot of stuff that you need to be a photographer, and when you're looking at videos online of people that are 10, 15 years into their studio, it can be a little daunting to know what the hell you even need to get. So in this video, I want to break that down and show you the absolute essentials that you're going to need if you want to be a professional photographer. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sergio and I'm a commercial photographer here in Victoria, BC. I've worked with magazines, I've shot for billboard ads, I've done quite a few things over my 12-ish year career, and one thing that's very consistent, no matter what the job size, whether you're shooting weddings or whether you're shooting a large commercial campaign, the equipment that you're going to bring is going to be specialist for certain occasions, but there is a lot of unifying factors. And that very first thing, obviously, without missing the elephant in the room, is going to be a camera. One of the things you probably want to focus on for a camera is whatever budget you have, split it in half and get two. That might not be the sexiest answer that you want to hear right now, but I think it's much smarter for you to buy two cameras that have a very similar sensor, if not the exact same sensor, than having a more expensive camera that does maybe a few extra things. Because if you're a professional and you show up on set and your camera stops working, then you're no longer a professional and you can't get the job done. Having two cameras allows one of them to overheat in the sun and the other one chilling in your bag. Having two cameras allows you to shoot photo and shoot video in two different formats so that your client who comes in and is like, oh, by the way, I also needed you to shoot video for this, you can actually deliver and you don't have to switch through all of your settings and then forget that you're still in a 30 FPS, a 24 FPS frame rate or whatever it is. Like, having two cameras eliminates that. So I think if you have $3,000 to spend $1,500 on each camera, or spend maybe $2,000 on a nice camera and then $1,000 on a backup used camera. You're going to go further as a photographer, as a professional, having two cameras. For the vast majority of my career, hobbyists or people that are just doing this for fun have had way better equipment than I do. And that's totally fine, because as a professional, you're getting paid to be a photographer. You're getting paid to know the ins and outs of your camera. And if you can maximize those, you'll be a better photographer than if you're trying to just buy the best camera because you think it's going to take the best photos. That's not how cameras work. So one of the things that you might want to focus on for what camera to buy, and if you're thinking, man, I only had $1,500 to spend total, then how am I going to get two cameras plus everything else that I'm about to list out in this video? Well, look used, because camera technology is constantly changing and there is literally no need to keep up with it. If photographers were shooting billboards in 2007, why can their cameras work and your camera from 2021 doesn't? Look at used markets, because today's cameras are so overdeveloped that if you can't take a picture with them, the problem is not the camera. Having 365 autofocus points is nice. You're only going to use one of them at a time. So you don't need to focus on having all of these tiny little DxO scores better on this one than that one. Just get the camera that fits your budget and maybe within the ecosystem that you want to stay. Unless you're shooting, like, you need to shoot 120 FPS 4K video, then sure, but we're photographers here, and the still life photography tech hasn't really changed. You don't need a 150 megapixel IQ4. You need a 23 megapixel 5D Mark III or 2 or maybe even a 1. Next up, you're going to need lenses for your camera, and I think it's very easy to get lost in the sea of lenses that you can get, that you can buy, that you need, that you don't have, that, oh my gosh, if I would only have the 1.2 version, then all my problems would be fixed. You need two lenses. You need a general lens and a specialist lens. That's it. That will get you 98% of your jobs done with nobody complaining whatsoever. You only need one lens at a time, maybe two if you're shooting photo and video at the same time, but that's why I'm saying you need a generalist lens and a specialist lens. That can be a 24 to 70, 24 to 105, some kind of zoom that covers the vast majority of what you need to shoot. Is it exciting? No, of course not. It's a generalist lens, but it's going to get the job done more often than not. You're not focusing on the decision fatigue that comes with having 16 lenses to choose from and not knowing what it is that you're going to shoot. Just get the one good one. If you're shooting within Canon, I would stick with the red ring lenses. I just hate variable aperture lenses, so don't get like a kit lens from like 4.5 to 6.3 or something like that. Just get yourself a nice 2.8 or an f4 lens that stays consistent among the zoom range, and you'll probably be good enough. My 24 to 105, I think, is from like 2005 or 2006 or something like that. It's got a crack on the front element. I shoot huge campaigns with it. It doesn't matter. Okay, so don't worry too much about how old the lens is, how primitive the technology feels. If you're shooting a well-exposed image on a camera with a lens, you're doing it fine. You don't need the latest and greatest because the story and what you're taking a picture of is so much more important than what you're taking it on. If you have to explain people what your equipment was for a certain photo, it's not what's making the photo. You're maybe impressing other photographers, but that's not what's going to affect your bottom line as a professional photographer. Getting a specialist lens is the next, I would say, in the list of lenses that you might want, because depending on the type of niche that you have, there's going to be a type of lens that stands out more than others. In my commercial product world, it's probably a nice macro lens or something like a tilt shift lens. In the wedding lens, maybe it's in the wedding world, maybe it's like an 85 1.2. Whatever realm that you're in, there's probably a specialist lens that's going to stand out more than most, and paired with a generalist lens that does the vast majority of things quite boringly, is going to cover all of your bases as a photographer. 2 cameras, 2 lenses. Let's move on. Another 2 thing would be 2 lights. I know that the vast majority of times, having 1 light versus no lights is going to be way better than having 2 lights versus 1 light. Like, having your first light is going to be the biggest game changer in your photography, but having 2 is just going to bring you to just be able to cover your bases, again, 99% of the time. Having 2 lights can transform any basic situation into a world that only exists in your head. As photographers, we're creating these environments. We're making the extraordinary out of the ordinary. By having 2 flashes, it allows us the ability to do that. Sometimes you might want 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 lights, but having those depreciate in your room doesn't really do anyone a service. But having 2 lights that you're going to use more than half the time on half your shoots is going to be really beneficial. Having the 1 is probably the most important, but if you have the extra little leeway, I would go for 2. And that can just be speed lights. I'm not saying you need to get huge strobes that you know, like, I'm not telling you to get the new 1200 apertures or get like the biggest strobe you can find. 2 little speed lights works. It's something that will transform your photography so much more than you can expect. There is maybe like a handful of niches that I could think of that might not need 2 lights specifically, but let's say even if you're shooting concerts, you're probably going to end up shooting those bands after the fact, and having 2 lights to shoot 5 or 6 or 8 people is going to help you rather than having just 1 little light. Having 4 lights is somewhat frivolous, but having 2 is going to be used way more often than you expect. So we've got 2 cameras, 2 lenses, 2 lights. We need some stands to put all that stuff on. Now, grip is super not exciting. It's the last thing that you think of when you want to take a picture. Maybe not the last thing. There's one more thing after this, but the grip is definitely one of the least sexy things to buy. But if you think about it, most photographers that buy a tripod or buy a C-stand, they get it once, and then it's just in their bag for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So you can either use that to your advantage and be like, all right, it's cool to spend money on something that is going to be in my arsenal for the rest of my career. That's pretty sweet. But also, I can just go on the used market and find something for the budget that I want to spend and get a way better value on it because it's 20 or 30 years old and it's still going to be just as good. An example of that would be my huge tripod that I'm sure some of you have seen in my videos that is from 94, 95. And it was the top of the line tripod back in the day from Manfrotto. But today, last year, I bought it for like $250 because of how much of this depreciation happened to it. But it's still literally the firmest tripod that I can find that I've ever seen outside of a salon stand. It weighs a ton and it's cumbersome and kind of difficult to use, but it works and it's super stable, and that's what I like about it. So what you might need, depending on your niche, again, like I absolutely need a tripod for the type of work that I do, so having a good tripod was important. Having lights that are a little bit heavier requires stands that are a little bit heavier, requires sandbags, requires a lot more things that are kind of cumbersome and annoying, but having overbuilt grip is something that's going to last you probably your entire career, and that's going to help you as a photographer. If you're looking at this as a professional photographer, you already got your cameras, you already got your lenses, you already got your lights, maybe think of upgrading your grip. Think of upgrading something that, again, not really sexy, but is going to last you your whole career, if you do it right at least. Now, lastly, I did tease about this, but as a professional photographer, the vast, vast majority of my jobs come from a friend of a friend of a friend whose friend had a friend that needed photos. And in order to have that land on me, I have to grow my network. And there is nothing that you can buy other than maybe like some friends, some coffees, that will help you grow your network, other than just putting the time, putting the effort in, and just genuinely being a good member of your community, of your society. We live in a society. Be the member of your photography community, whatever your niche is. Like I work with restaurants a lot, so being known by that world is important. So just focus on your network, focus on the person taking the photos and not the equipment that they're taking it with. And that's what's going to make you a better photographer in the long run. It's not having 14 cameras, it's not having 73 lenses, all of the lights under the sun, make sure they're brown color, make sure that they're this and that and the other. None of that matters. What matters is the person taking the photos, and if the person taking the photos is not a dick, they're going to get more jobs in the long run. So focus on that, you'll be a better photographer. I hope you guys like this one. Maybe subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in a couple days. Later.